video. I saw this video last night when I was about to fall asleep, and I just couldn't stop watching it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't believe this is real. It's just like four guys from Turning Point USA sitting around a table talking about how evil Cuba is, while also raising money and selling their merch. They're doing a fundraiser called #Socialism Sucks. So this is going to be awesome. Let's watch this, and I'll just give my live reaction. I stopped watching it last night because I was like, I need to react to this live on stream. I don't want to watch this and then think about it and then go on stream. I want to like react to parts of this while I'm on stream because it'll be funny. So yeah, I've watched like the first part of this and that's it. But let's check it out now, huh?
Everything that you've ever seen about Cuba is a lie.
So when Benny first gave us the news that we're going, I think we all got excited. So I started doing a lot of research. I was looking online, and all I saw was a beautiful country. Very colorful photos with all the classic American cars. To know that this is a socialist country, the pieces didn't quite fit to me.
Classic American cars, I don't even know what he's talking about. The majority of Cuba's cars to this day are Soviet made. Because the Soviet Union was Cuba's main trading partner from 1960 after the Cuban Revolution through 1990 or 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed, which is known as the special period in Cuba, where all of a sudden they didn't have the Soviet Union as his trading partner, and the U.S. embargo and the U.S. blockade became much more powerful, much more successful in choking their people off, and still many of the cars today are old school Soviet cars, so maybe they have American cars, but I don't know if that's true. And obviously that's subjective. Like I'm sure they have different cars, but what I've heard is most of the old cars there are still from the Soviet era.
We're supposed to say socialism sucks, but how are we gonna show that if socialism doesn't actually suck? All I can see about Cuba is as this gorgeous Caribbean wonderland. Nothing in American establishment or corporate media will prepare you for what you are about to see when you land in Cuba.
That is true. Nothing you will see in the establishment or the corporate media will prepare you for what you're going to see when you're in Cuba. Michael Parenti might, if you watch Michael Parenti's in-depth description of what Cuba was like before and after the revolution. Marxist philosopher Jean Paul Sartre also spent lots of time in Cuba. He was critical of the Cuban Revolution, but he talked a lot about the brothels and the casinos and the plantations and the corruption that existed in Cuba before the revolution versus how it was cleaned up after the revolution and the struggles that Cuba faced after the revolution trying to get around the U.S. embargo. So no corporate media and the establishment media will not prepare you for what's in Cuba, but Turning Point USA is the establishment media. They're heavily funded by the same billionaires who dump money into Fox News and CNN, so they're just pretending to be, right-wing anti-establishment, as if that exists. They are the establishment. Turning Point USA is an arm of corporate America.
It's all lies, all of it. It's communist propaganda, what you see about Cuba.
And once we got on the island, going through customs, once we got our bags, then people came out because we were on their radar, and they go into the back and they're like, we have to take this back and examine it.
They didn't like that there was a drone inside my suitcase.
Yeah.
And because they didn't like that, they took my passport for 7 hours.
Emotionally, it went from what is this place, when we were in the line, to getting angry, to getting pretty furious and just screw this place, to then just kind of after hour 5 you're just Stockholm syndrome, okay, I guess I speak Spanish and live in Cuba now.
What is this guy talking about? So they had a drone in their bag, so the Cuban TSA or their version of the TSA searched their bags and held their passport, which How many times did the CIA unsuccessfully try to kill Fidel Castro, including literally invading his country in the Bay of Pigs? How many different attempts did they make to infiltrate Cuba and kill Fidel? Like, you don't think the Cuban government has reason to be suspicious about Americans who work for TPUSA, a right-wing billionaire-funded group, coming into their country with a drone? You don't see anything weird about them searching your bags? And then, have you ever been through American TSA? I spent like 3 hours in an airport a while back. Sometimes if you miss your flights, they'll just give you another flight like 2 days in advance, and they don't really care if you have somewhere to be. Because these private airlines only care about maximizing their profits, of course. That's how, private entities work who function within a market system. So because the Cuban government searches people who are coming from the country who is actively trying to overthrow their government, because they question people who come from that country with drones, they're an authoritarian dictatorship, and you thought you were stuck in Cuba forever as they investigated these drones and the fact that you work for Turning Point USA. You think that you were stuck in Cuba forever, for one, and two, that's unlike anything that ever happens in the U.S. Like, apparently you have not flown on American Airlines once, because there are lots of people stuck in the airport, lots of people who get searched, and lots of people who are annoyed by the airport security. And oftentimes for much less reason than the Cuban government has to search you goons who work for TPUSA.
And it's like whatever happens, happens, and you're just kind of like submitting to this terrible process.
When we left the airport, after 7 hours, I think we thought, the worst is behind us, and we could not have been more wrong.
To see everything online prior,
Look at these guys. Like, not to be a bully, but look at these dudes. Telling their story in Cuba like they almost got trapped there because they got searched for by airport security for trying to bring a drone into the country. This guy's like, oh, I speak Spanish now. I'm stuck in Cuba. What is going on? This is the worst thing ever. Like, imagine if there were 4 Cuban people sitting here working for a Cuban government outlet, and they're like, we went to America, and the TSA searched us for hours. Or maybe they say, we brought our Muslim friend to America, and the TSA searched him just because he's Muslim. How horrible and racist the American country is. What an authoritarian dictatorship, because we had our bags searched at the airport. You get your bags searched at the airport in any country in the world. These guys are ridiculous. This guy's hair is ridiculous, too. I kind of like it, though. I don't know.
this was like a wake-up call. That's when we started to realize that Cuba sucks.
So let's do a list of things you can't.
Someone says our immigration does this to people all the time. That's true. These are people who, these Turning Point USA guys are not only from the country who has ICE, but they support ICE. They're in favor of ICE. They're in favor of locking children in cages when they're coming over the border if they don't have the right papers. But when they try and bring a drone into Cuba, the country that the U.S. is holding under embargo and has been trying to destroy and assassinate their president for years, and they get searched by the airport security, that's authoritarian. That's a dictatorship. Not the organization called ICE whose sole purpose is to find illegal immigrants and put them in cages or ship them out of the country.
Can't get in Cuba. Like regular things that you can't get in Cuba.
Water.
Couldn't find water.
Gas.
Can't find gas.
Chicken.
Food.
We can't find gas. There's no gas available.
How many times do you guys think that these dudes mention the embargo? So the U.S. is strangling Cuba under an embargo, lobbied by the people who fund Turning Point USA, and then these entitled white guys who work for TPUSA are going to Cuba and saying, oh, they don't have any gas, they don't have any chicken. Like, what a dictatorship. Like, yeah, that's why you don't put embargoes on countries. That's why it's wrong to stop Cuba from trading with any country in the world, because it makes them really, really hard to get gas and chicken for white tourists like you when the largest empire in the history of the world has troops around their border and are blocking any trade from the rest of the world from getting through. What a joke. They don't have chicken. They don't have gas and chicken for my tourist white ass. Yeah, end the embargo, dummy.
The gas station we go to, shut down.
Day 2, trying to get gas.
We're in the biggest city in the country. We're in the most modern city in the country. And this is the beginning of the line to get gas. Here we go.
I like how they call it the most modern city in the country. I want to bring up the line that Parenti gives about Cuba. Since the revolution, yes, they've been held under embargo. They haven't been able to trade with the rest of the world. And yes, this has stopped them from fully developing their infrastructure. And the paint is peeling off the walls in Havana, Cuba, but now they have doctors. Now people in the rural regions of Cuba don't have to walk for days to find a doctor, and they don't get banned from walking through plantations because wealthy plantation owners think it's more important to protect their crops that equal a profit than allow these people to get to the doctor's office that takes 2 days to get to. So tons of people were dying. Now people can get to the doctors. Now literacy has been abolished. Now there are no longer plantation owners funneling profits to the West, treating indigenous Cuban people as essentially slaves. So yes, it's not the most developed city. It's not the most modern city for four dudes from Turning Point, USA. Compared to like New York, which was built on resources stolen from countries like Cuba for hundreds of years. And it's just the ridiculousness of these four guys who work for a corporate entity like TPUSA going to a country like Cuba that's been held under embargo for 60 years, where they now have provided, education and relative stability as far as food and medical supply, or relatively good medical services compared to what they could have if the embargo was lifted. And then these four dudes from Turning Point USA are like, oh, this isn't very modern. You guys are so entitled and disgusting.
You'll notice people are sitting in their cars. These aren't parked cars. These are people that are sitting and waiting. It is probably 100 degrees outside. You have multiple people that are pushing their cars. Look, these people are pushing their vehicles because their vehicles are out of gas. This is a functioning line. These are not parked cars. These are human beings inside of their vehicles.
One, I don't see anybody pushing their car like he's saying. Do you guys? Two, thank you for proving that the Cuban government is rationing the limited amount of gas that they have due to the embargo. Where, Turning Point USA guys, would you like them to get gas from? Where would you like this small island country to find gas when they don't naturally produce a lot of gas, and when there's U.S. ships sitting in between them and Venezuela in the Caribbean, blocking any trade from between the two countries when Venezuela does have an abundance of gas, or blocking any trade from Iran in the Middle East, who are also under crippling sanctions, so they can't import any gas? Where are they supposed to get the gas from, TPUSA? Are they supposed to invent it with magic? Do you guys not know how labor and production works because you're capitalists who have never worked a real job in your life? Is that the case? I think it is.
They're pushing the cars. They're eating lunch. Here we go.
And also, this shows us exactly what the Cuban government is doing in order to get around the embargo. They ration gas. They say every single person gets, this amount of gas. Imagine if the embargo was placed on this country and there wasn't a government or a system of production that rationed resources and distributed them to make sure that everybody has enough or what they need. If you allowed these plantation owners or capitalists to just plunder the resources and hoard them from the working masses. That's how Cuba worked prior to 1959, and thousands of people died from starvation or from lack of medical services or from just degradation from working in the fields for like 12 to 15 hours a day for their Western plantation owners. Why wasn't TPUSA doing a video then, right? Why don't they go through the plantations of Cuba and show the utter devastation and lack of stability and lack of health care and lack of access to food or lack of access to gas that the Cuban working class had before the revolution? Why do they only show this country being starved by the U.S., rationing goods to make sure that nobody starves to death or goes homeless or goes hungry or doesn't have access to education, and saying, oh, look at this horrible country, look at how they ration goods? Like, if they didn't ration those goods, way more people would be dying, and way more people were dying before they started doing this and before they started controlling their production.
Up there, see that? That's the gas station. And so what we ended up doing was cheating the system. And a guy pops his head into my car door and says, my name is Stalin. We don't actually know much about Stalin.
We don't know anything about Stalin.
Literally, we come home and Benny came and we meet him outside. He was like, hey guys, meet Stalin. He's gonna take me to go get gas.
And then he gets in the car and you're like, see you guys. And we're like, Benny's gonna die. Yeah. That's the last time we'll see him.
This is also, oh, sorry, I forgot to mute my mic, but this is also like borderline racist, right? Like, oh, a Cuban guy came up and said he would help us find gas. Uh-oh, this is the last time we're ever going to see Benny. He's leaving with a Cuban guy. Oh, no. Like, what's going to happen? They're not all murderers, you weirdos. I'm more worried about the Cuban guy being stuck with you people.
Thanks, Stalin.
So here's Stalin hustling me.
I genuinely lost weight in Cuba. Like, I genuinely came home roughly 8 pounds lighter.
I hate Americans. That's the last straw. I came home from Cuba 8 pounds lighter. You poor thing. You poor Westerner sitting on the stolen wealth from the entirety of the global South. I'm so sorry that you had to experience a country that the U.S. is starving under embargo for like a week. That had to be so tough for you to lose those 8 pounds while you experienced what it's like to live in a country that the U.S. is trying to destroy for like a week of your life, and then came back and acted like it was the most traumatic experience ever on this weird corporate TV show with your other entitled friends. Oh my.
The food looked like a child made it.
Yeah, it looked like your kids made you a meal on Father's Day.
That's all they have. They just get what the government delivers them every day.
I think we decided to go grocery shopping because the food was trash and we can't get anywhere, so we'll just go to the grocery store. So we drove over there.
Now they're just complaining that the food was trash. Oh, the government brought us our food. Yeah, they have to ration goods because the corporations who you guys work for are purposefully starving them in the hope that they'll overthrow the government, so then those corporations can start robbing them of their natural resources. So yes, the government has to ration food. I'm sorry, you entitled losers who work for TPUSA think the food was trash. They have to ration it because your bosses are starving them. So sorry that the food was not up to par.
All together, we pulled up to the grocery store and the gates were closed and there was a line down the street.
This is insane.
All of a sudden the guards come to the gate and they open the gate. And that's when, I've never seen this before, but everyone swarmed. People started...
Oh yeah, you've never seen that before? Did you go to any small town during the pandemic? Did you go to any town and see the people lined up outside of food banks trying to get bread? I know you said you've never seen bread lines anywhere other than Cuba where they ration goods to make sure people aren't starved to death by the U.S. embargo. But if you would have opened your eyes and spent any time with working people in the United States for the last year, you would have seen a lot of bread lines in capitalist countries where apparently this doesn't happen.
Running, even people that weren't in line that were just like in the area just start sprinting in there because this is their only chance to get their essentials and the necessities to feed their families.
So I really hope that you like Conchita mango marmalade because we have a whole aisle of it. Here in Cuba, you can get an individually wrapped hamburger, and that's as fresh as the meat actually gets. Oh, this one's all melty. Ooh. But my God.
I hate how they're just acting grossed out too. Because it's obviously the government has to ration these goods, and you see the grocery store is actually full. It is actually full of goods, and people talk about how you can't get hamburgers in Cuba because the government doesn't allow farmers to kill cows. Well, if they allowed farmers to kill cows, they wouldn't have any meat at all. They wouldn't have any cows at all because they can't just import meat because of the embargo. So then you have these Americans like picking out their hamburgers, which other right-wing people have told me that Cuba doesn't have any meat. There's no meat you can find in the place. They're just going and talking about how it's gross, right? So as their country is starving this small island country under embargo, and the small island country is stocking their grocery stores full of the goods that they need to survive, doing the best they can, you have these wealthy Americans like, ew, this hamburger is individually wrapped. Has anybody seen this? Has anybody seen that the grocery store doesn't have 100 kinds of cereal? This is disgusting. This is communism. Like, they would have more goods if you lifted the embargo, for one. And two, it shows how Americans have no idea the kind of situation that we put countries in when we do economic warfare, when we put embargoes on them. Americans are so used to just unlimited consumerism, unlimited consumer goods that we can access at any time, you know, assuming we have enough money, which is 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, so we don't even have the money to buy a lot of the things we have in our grocery store. But it shows how Americans don't even understand what our economic warfare campaigns are doing to countries, right? They go to a grocery store where they only see one good, and they're like, whoa, how could this happen? How horrible. It happens because of the embargo, right? But when these people hear economic warfare or blockade, they think, oh, that's not real warfare, right? That's not a real war, that's economic warfare. And then they have no idea the effects until they actually go to a grocery store in Cuba, and then you see how ridiculous and stupid they look when they're like, oh, there's only one good here. How weird. This must be communism. No, it's economic warfare and a 60-year embargo.
Can you get a lot of the exact same brand of garbanzo beans? And then after you're done buying all these incredible products, you can stand in line for literally an hour, which is as...
Now they're complaining about standing in line. Yeah, you've never seen that at a U.S. grocery store. Private grocery stores don't have lines. What? And someone says, is Cuba blocked from trade with the U.S. or all countries? All countries, except for those who defy the embargo. So the U.S. has troops set up, or they have troops in the Caribbean. They've been increasing troop presence in the Caribbean, and then their Navy patrols that whole area. It's obviously very close to where Venezuela is also. So when countries try and ship the things that they need, the U.S. military can intervene. So recently Iran tried shipping 4 oil tankers to Venezuela, and they said, we don't care about this embargo. The U.S. isn't going to stop us from bringing these people oil that they need to run their country. The U.S. not only stopped the oil from getting there to Venezuela, but they took the oil and they brought it back to Houston and gave 4 tankers of oil to a private American company. So not only is economic warfare enforced with other countries who the U.S. has nothing to do with, but the U.S. uses their military to enforce this economic warfare, and they've stolen the goods that other countries try to trade with Cuba and Venezuela.
As long as we've been standing in line. I'm telling you, you probably are not going to like Cuba that much. There was literally no fresh fruit, no fresh meat, no fresh vegetables, nothing. There was one brand of the things they did have, and the things they didn't have, well, screw you.
And another thing that's interesting and funny about this too, obviously it's crazy for these Americans who live in an imperialist country to be making fun of Cuba for not having the same level of fresh meat and fresh goods and fresh produce. But there are so many Americans who don't have access to those things. There are so many Americans who grow up eating at food banks, or who grow up only shopping at Aldi's and only being able to afford the generic brands. And then it's a really cool thing when you can eat brand name cereal when you go to your friend's house for a sleepover or something. And you can see these corporate corporate goons who work for TPUSA have never been in that situation. They don't realize there are people in America right now only eating generic foods, or who are struggling to put food on the table, who are struggling to pay their bills. So they go to Cuba and they see it happening in this country. We're starving under embargo, and they're like, oh wow, this is unique to Cuba. Won't all Americans be shocked by this? Like, no, a lot of Americans shop in grocery stores that look very similar to the grocery store that y'all are in right now. And this country isn't under an embargo. We just have all the wealth that's been stolen from the global south sitting in a small ruling class of financial elites and oligarchs, whereas the working class who actually creates value, 78% of us live paycheck to paycheck. So I don't think, Americans are going to be as shocked as you think by the fact that Cuba doesn't have 800 different kinds of meat at their store.
So, that is life inside of socialist Pan Americana here in Cuba. Socialism sucks. this area was so developed. All around you, there's just beautiful development. Mansions, by every American standard, mansions. Just one generation, all of this wealth, all of this beauty evaporated, rotted, unsustainable because nobody has any private wealth to keep it up.
This is just a block up.
That's why, because nobody has any private wealth. Did you go to Cuba before the revolution when there was private wealth in the country? It was an entire country of sugar and tobacco plantations except for Havana, Cuba, which was a brothel and a casino for the super rich Western capitalists who were stealing Cuba's resources. Is that what you would like Cuba to look like? Is that what countries look like when there's tons of private wealth? Or how about Colombia? Would you like Cuba to look like Colombia right now? Wildly unequal society where the people who have that private wealth are essentially living like oligarchs, like aristocrats, while the rest of the country is experiencing mass poverty. That's a U.S.-backed country, a right-wing capitalist country in Latin America. Is that what you would like to see Cuba turn into? And again, you know, you hear about them talking about the infrastructure disappearing within a generation. I'm assuming they're talking about the 90s during the special period. After the Soviet Union collapsed and Cuba no longer had a trading partner, making the U.S. embargo extremely effective. But of course they never mention that because these people aren't talking about the news. They're not talking about history. They're not giving you geopolitical information. They're propagandists for billionaires at Turning Point USA who would love to steal Cuba's resources once again and who are salty that Havana, Cuba is no longer a brothel and a casino for their rich entitled asses to hang out.
From the tourist area, and there's so much trash and garbage in the street that it is like the smell is so putrid you can barely walk by it.
You know they just found like the dirtiest alleyway they could find in Cuba. Like, are you telling me alleyways don't exist like this in the United States? I can think of like 5 different streets in my town right now that look worse than this. Or you could just go to a dumpster or a landfill in the U.S. and be like, this is what the cities look like. Oh, capitalism sucks, right? You would never want to live here. Look at this rundown alleyway I found. This is going to exist in every country.
Flies everywhere. There's just an overflowing dumpster of rotting trash. Really gross.
You hear, it's like a trope. Communism, everyone's equal. Equally miserable. Equally sad. Equally depressed, equally poor. Ha ha ha, it's like you can see it on a t-shirt. No, it actually does suck. Like, it actually is that. Like, communism succeeds in the crushing of the human spirit.
Again, is communism equally poor, or is Cuba rationing goods as they're starved under an embargo? And how poor was everybody in pre-1959 Cuba? You had like 1% of the population, wealthy white Cubans who were allied with the Western corporations, the Cuban bourgeoisie who was wealthy, and then 99% of the country was basically, well, not 99%, but the working class of the country and the peasantry of the country were essentially slaves, and then people who lived in the cities lived a little better, but they were in massive poverty. Now, you know, they have a stable society where people are able to get what they need thanks to the government rationing goods and coming up with modes of production, like this thing that they've recently been doing where they've been finding ways to get new soil to grow new crops because the soil is monocropic from the years of extraction of sugar and tobacco from the plantations. It's harder for Cuba to grow food. They've been finding new agricultural techniques to grow food for their people and make sure that their people don't starve. But these people look at that and they just completely ignore the embargo and they say communism ruined these people's lives. Let's go back to the slave plantations that allowed Western corporations to profit a bunch. That's much better because people are less equal. Then you allow some people to thrive at the expense of the rest of society who gets thrown into borderline slavery. Like, yes, that's much better, TPUSA.
And the helplessness and the beaten downness of the Cuban people is one of the saddest things I've ever experienced.
I'll never forget that building that me and Josh snuck into, walking around. This is a beachfront property, and it looked like a war zone. It looked like a bomb had hit it.
They just went into a random abandoned parking garage, and they're like, this looks like a war zone. Like, yeah, it's a building that hasn't been maintained. There are about 1 million of those in the U.S. and in every capitalist country ever. Because if you don't maintain buildings, they crumble. So I'm not sure how socialism caused this, but I don't know. I'm going to go find a random parking garage in my town, and then I'll film it. I'll film some of the graffiti, and I'll put really sad, haunting music, and I'll talk about how capitalism created it. And then I'll post it as a response to this video.
Walk inside, you can see 2 stories down because the floors are blown out. Same thing upstairs, just crumbled. When I went back outside, I noticed that there's fresh laundry, and people inside these buildings, they are still living in this building. And I will never forget that. That, to me, is just like...
This looks no different than the projects. People are commenting like you see this kind of stuff in Detroit or New York. Look at this. This is just like an apartment. So they went to a different part, like a parking garage or a different part of this building that was crumbling, and then they filmed this part of the building, which is apparently attached to the other building they're in. They're like, look at the horrible degradation these people live in. Like... I haven't seen anybody on the streets, and in America there are hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, or I'm not sure what the exact statistic is, but thousands of people on the streets, and there are tons of homes that look just like this. Actually, these places, if you look inside, they look kind of nice. Not super nice, obviously, but compared to the projects, they don't even look that much worse. This is a ridiculous propaganda video. It literally is just regime change propaganda cooked up by 4 really dumb, entitled guys who seem like they've never been outside of... someone in the chat said they look like they've never been outside of Beverly Hills. Like, that is literally what this is. 4 Beverly Hills guys took their camera to Cuba and tried to make it look as awful as possible.
Like, you cannot tell me that socialism works.
Look around you. The effects of socialism are everywhere. Crumbling infrastructure and disgusting living conditions.
I don't like how he said disgusting there. Disgusting living conditions. Big government sucks. What about the big government starving them under embargo? For 60 years now. Notice how that hasn't been mentioned once in the video. You lying propagandist who treats the Cuban people, this small island country, like they're disgusting for combating the American empire, who would see their people used as slaves and see their natural resources turned into Western profits. And you go to their country and you call them disgusting without even mentioning the embargo. You are disgusting. You are part of a disgusting part of America.
That is what socialism has brought to Cuba. Maybe the socialists in America should take a short trip, a short 90-mile trip, and come here and say they want this in America.
I don't. I talk about the embargo every day, you dipshit, but you guys don't listen to us because you're too stupid and you're funded by corporations who want to rob Cuba. And then you act like everyone else, all these socialists are just so dumb, they don't understand. You don't even know that there's a 60-year embargo on Cuba when you went to their country, and you didn't even mention that in this nonsensical video. I would love to say that you're a moron, but you're not. You're a propagandist for billionaires who want to rob Cuba.
It was like going through ruins. The horrific thing is that no one is living in the Pantheon right now. Like, no one lives in the Acropolis. It's a ruin. These are ruins that people are living in. Socialism is popular in America now. What do you think of socialism?
It's very popular.
Yeah.
Wow. But now for us, no, it's good. For Cuban people now.
Not good?
No, my friend, no, it's possible petroleum.
Yeah.
Nothing. For this, the people, no, it's possible go for the walking.
Listen to me. My country is very because everything problem here. Don't have petroleum for bus and Cuban, for car, for drive, for nothing. You understand? My country is very
A rec center that looks like...
These people's only complaint, and of course, Americans love to find right-wing Cubans and interview them. Right-wingers love to use identity politics when it fits their narrative. But their main complaint is that they can't import petroleum. That's caused by the blockade. There's literally U.S. naval ships right outside of where these people are, making sure that Iran or Venezuela don't import petroleum. And their main complaint is that they import petroleum. And look at this guy. Look at his face. Oh, socialism sucks. It's so horrible. Please don't mention the embargo. Please don't mention that and blow up our entire nonsensical argument about why socialism sucks and Cuba is evil.
Like this would be completely condemned, but this is a functional rec center in Cuba. There's kids playing soccer right over here. this is the reality of what happens when you have capitalism that goes to socialism.
You have kids who play soccer together? Do you know why soccer is the most popular sport in the world? Because it doesn't take anything to play. So while American football in the U.S. is one of the most expensive sports in the world, and not to say, all American working class people have it easy, as we were saying earlier, but the reason is because we can afford the pads, we can afford the gear. But these countries in the global south who the U.S. holds under embargo or who remain capitalist and allow Western multinationals to extract their resources often don't have anything except a ball and a place to play. So soccer, becomes the most popular sport amongst these countries in the global south who the U.S. is destroying, like Diego Maradona of Argentina, who is a socialist, pro-Hugo Chavez, probably the greatest soccer player of all time. There are countless examples of amazing soccer players from the global south, left-leaning, who grew up in poverty, and they learned to play soccer because that was all they had. They learned to play football because that was all they had. And then here you have these wealthy Americans going to the country starved under embargo by the U.S. and be like, oh, look at how bad this is. Like, the kids are playing soccer on a rooftop. Like, playing soccer on a rooftop is fun. I'm sure you didn't do that in Beverly Hills growing up, but there's nothing wrong with playing soccer on a rooftop with your buddies.
And the people who suffer under this are honestly the kids, because this is where they have the play. It sucks.
It doesn't look like it sucks at all. It looks like you're saying it sucks and these kids are having fun playing soccer together. It looks like a wealthy American going to Cuba and seeing people having fun playing soccer and going, oh, they don't have consumerism. They don't know how bad they have it. This is insane. You're literally filming kids playing soccer and talking about how bad their life sucks. Does not suck. This looks fun. This looks like they're hanging out with their friends. Is that what you think sucks? I imagine that is what people at TPUSA think is stupid and is not fun. Playing a game with a group of friends rather than consuming goods and eating expensive food.
And it pisses you off too, because the people there, the people of Cuba are some of the nicest people I've ever met. So watching them live in turmoil, watching them live in ruins, actually kind of like pisses you off.
The Cuban people are actually really happy and nice, and they don't hate their situation. But the fact that they don't have the same consumerism as us pisses me off, and it makes me want to overthrow their government and implement neoliberalism so that these stupid Cuban people can have the consumerism they need. And even though they think they're happy and they think they're content and they seem nice, they're not. I need to bring them capitalism to make them happy. This pisses me off.
And these people don't know any better. Their families have been there for...
Oh my God, he said it out loud. These people don't know any better. They don't know that their country is starved under embargo and the government has to ration goods, otherwise more people would die. They don't know the history of their own country that came from a country owned by Western plantation owners and now is a revolutionary country that ships more doctors around the world than any other country. They don't know, they just think it's okay. They just think it's normal. They don't know as much as me, an American coming to their country for the first time, not mentioning the embargo once, not mentioning pre-revolutionary Cuba once, and telling their people that they're all poor and sad because they don't have the same level of consumerism. I know the history of their country. These people are too stupid to understand. How can you say that? How can you say these people don't understand what they're going through? You just assume that Americans know what they're going through more than the actual people of Cuba. Shut up. It makes me embarrassed to even be from this country when I see stuff like that.
Generations. But it'll actually piss you off to see really great people, friendly people, welcoming, warm people subjugated to living in trash.
You ever consider that they're more friendly and more kind than you because they're not spending their whole life chasing profit, spending their whole life chasing a dollar, trying to become one of the exploiters rather than the exploited so they can live in stability and comfort rather than constantly having to sell their labor to survive and constantly chase the almighty dollar and be more selfish in order to make it in life? Do you ever think that's why the Cuban people are nice and have more of a collective spirit? And of course, I'm not saying, communism is actually to make everyone equally poor. Yes, I want the U.S. to lift their embargo so that Cuba can provide provide more things for their people, rebuild their infrastructure, and do various things like that. But the collective spirit of the Cuban people that he's noticing here is a lot because, they don't have the brainwashing of capitalism, that their people do put in labor for the good of the community rather than to advance their own status and rather than trying to climb to the top at the expense of everyone else, which is the kind of mindset that capitalism indoctrinates us with. So it's like these people are noticing the collective spirit of the Cuban people and the kindness of the Cuban people that's better than the Americans. But, they don't take their analysis any further than that, right? They're just like, oh, it's nice people living in bad conditions. They need consumerism and capitalism from America. They definitely didn't know what they were doing when they had a revolution and kicked out American capitalism. Let's help them. We the white saviors are on our way.
Police are here. For some reason, I thought the buzzer at the door would be like police, and it actually was. And now we're seeing what they're gonna do with our cards and if we're going to jail.
You hear the buzzer ringing, it continues to ring.
This is interesting. I hope they get thrown in jail. I hope they spend a night in Cuban prison for entering this country with drones and cooking up a regime change propaganda video with 1.2 million viewers. People might be thinking, oh, you're authoritarian. You want the Cuban government to crack down on these people? Yeah, I don't care about these people. These are propagandists lying about Cuba to try and promote regime change, to try and get people to support the U.S. government overthrowing this country so they can't ration their goods and so the U.S. embargo can be more effective and then Western multinationals can penetrate the country and start stealing their resources. So yes, I would support the Cuban government, maybe not locking these people up, but kicking them out of the country, saying, leave, you have no business here. You're going around filming our country, talking about how socialism sucks and how poor and how terrible and disgusting we are, while not even mentioning the fact that your country has had a 60-year embargo on us and they have the largest military in the history of the world who prevents any country from trading with us. Get out of here, you white corporate mouthpieces. That is what I hope the Cuban government did, but we'll see.
Continues to ring.
We were joking. Because it woke us up and I was like, it's the cops. And then our translator comes in, he's like, it's the cops.
This was an armed contingent of probably a dozen people, one person in a doctor's outfit, and a bunch of government officials, many of them brandishing weapons, that were physically banging down the door, demanding access, and demanding that we leave all of our stuff to them.
And these guys did so little research on Cuba. They understand this country so little that, they don't realize why this would be happening, why the Cuban government would be sketchy about people who work for Turning Point USA, a private institution funded by Western billionaires in their country filming a propaganda video, why the Cuban government would be sketched out by that. As we were saying earlier, the CIA had tried to kill Fidel Castro countless times. The U.S. has obviously tried tons of regime change attempts and funneled tons of right-wing money into the country in order to try and propagate regime change and create regime change in addition to the embargo, right? We'll starve the people under embargo, and then we'll try and back and funnel money into any right-wing groups we can who can then destabilize the country and overthrow the government, let Western multinationals in. But these Turning Point USA guys understand Cuba so little. They're just like, this is authoritarian. What are these people doing here? We're going to die. Like, no, the Cubans are just worried you are there to overthrow their government, and they're right to be worried, because what did you do? You filmed a video encouraging that their government be overthrown, and then you published it with your billionaire money and got 1.2 million views. So the Cuban government was exactly right to kick you out.
And so I got on the phone with the embassy. The guy says, get here now.
All right, let's get the out of this country. So what did she tell you?
So the lady, while we're leaving, was freaked out, just absolutely freaked out. Government officials knocking down her door. She fears for...
Look how authoritarian this is. Look at the government officials in Cuba forcing them at gunpoint to leave the country. They're just like leisurely leaving with their bags as they're talking about how the government officials are forcing them out. Yeah, as I said, I'm sure the Cuban officials did ask them to leave. I'm sure the government said, hey, you can't be here with Turning Point USA filming regime change propaganda about our country. Go home. But now they're talking about how the authoritarian government is forcing them out as they just leisurely leave with their suitcases. Where's the government forcing you out with guns?
For her own safety, for her going to jail, and let us know clearly that's not something that happened.
I hope this is the last time we have to deal.
And the government didn't even take their cameras. They're still being allowed to film, and they were allowed to leave with all the footage. What is authoritarian about this?
With the country of Cuba.
Like the embassy staff was very sweet, talking with us, like personally meeting with us.
Yeah, he came out.
Very sweet. But the embassy staff came out and said something horrific, and something that was probably the scariest thing said to me in all of Cuba, which is, I can't help you. Like, when you guys are out there, I can't help you.
They were so nice. They were so very helpful. They were kind people. They were trying to help us get back. But then they said, we might not be able to help you. Like, nobody in America would ever say that, right? Nobody would say, would offer you help and then send you somewhere else and be like, oh, I can't help you over there. Like, that happens all the time, you know, when you work with someone, when you're trying to get something done as far as traveling, they often say, okay, I'll help you with this, but I can't help you with that, go over there. Were they saying I can't help you as in what does that mean? That's such a broad term. He's like, this is the scariest thing I heard in all of Cuba, other than when the Cuban airport security searched our bag because we had a drone, how authoritarian, how scary. Like, this doesn't seem scary at all. It seems like you guys are whiny babies.
He didn't want us to be in that situation, so the guy leaned in and essentially said, I'm asking you to leave the country. So we booked that flight, we changed that flight, we were out, and within 2 hours, we were at the airport, gone. We are at the airport.
So they weren't even kicked out. The guy at the U.S. Embassy asked them nicely to leave, and they got a flight, and they went home. Wow, how authoritarian. You guys were right. Cuba is so much worse than the U.S., where videos last year came out of cops murdering innocent black people in the streets. Cuba is much worse because they asked 4 guys working for Turning Point USA cooking up regime change propaganda about Cuba to catch the next flight home. That is authoritarianism, folks.
Port in Havana, leaving Havana a day early. That is how our Cuba trip ends, with some more awesome government.
It's heartbreaking that that's just a reality for the Cuban people. They don't know natural rights. Even more so heartbreaking.
Some of the shots they got of Cuba actually look nice. Like, this looks pretty cool. This actually kind of looks like Chicago, on the river there. Like, yeah, there's crumbling buildings. Oh no, that exists in every country in the world. But this looks beautiful. The ocean there, very cool.
They don't know natural rights. Even more so heartbreaking is that there are Americans here that would have that governance brought here.
You're so heartbroken for the Cuban people. Give me a break. Spare me your crocodile tears, you propagandists. What's even sadder is that there are Americans here who would love to see socialism. What's sad is that there are people who go to Cuba and talk about the poverty and the struggles that they're facing without mentioning the embargo, the capitalist, imperialist embargo that's been stopping their country from importing goods and services for 60 years, that forces them to ration things like petroleum. That is what's upsetting about Cuba. And here's this guy talking about how sad he is. He's so sad about the Cuban people because of socialism. And what's even more sad than that is the great and wonderful America, hundreds of times better than Cuba. There are people here advocating for socialism too. How sad. Yes, that is sad. It makes me almost want to cry.
I felt like that experience was the front lines of what communism really is. And it's not even, we didn't even see the worst of it, but just we had a fraction of that, and to see it firsthand and to realize that's what people are like wanting to bring to America.
That's what people are wanting to bring to America. No, we want our own form of socialism that reinvests this country's money in rebuilding our infrastructure, which gets a grade of D-, which is why you have places that look like this all over America, even though we're the richest country in the world, because all that money is being funneled to oligarchs rather than being reinvested in the people, being reinvested in job programs. So socialism is the way to make America's infrastructure not crumbling, for one, which is the goal of socialists in America. And for two, we want to stop using our tax dollars to do things like economic warfare and keep Cuba in a situation like this. The U.S. actively holds countries' infrastructures in poverty so they can funnel all the money created by labor and created by natural resources into capitalist profits. And socialists want to reinvest those profits in rebuilding the infrastructure. But of course, TPUSA inverts the situation completely because they're morons.
Seeing everything on social media and online about Cuba and it looking so amazing, then to see the harsh reality of Cuba is just, I don't get it. I don't get why that's all you see.
This is what it's like to live without a U.S. Constitution. It is the rights and the vibrancy and the ability.
This is what it's like to live without a U.S. Constitution. No rights. Cuba had a constitution written by the U.S. before the revolution, or they had a pro-Western constitution before the revolution. It allowed plantations and basically slaves and the enslavement of their indigenous population. And yes, that is the kind of rights and freedoms that Turning Point USA would love to bring to Cuba. Ha 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 ha. Shut up.
I have a First Amendment right to just say what you want. Gone in Cuba. Second Amendment right? Gone in Cuba. Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, you have no rights.
Why? Because you guys got searched at the airport and asked to leave? You don't think you have any rights? Nothing happened to you while you were there. You just complained about stuff that Americans are used to having and complained about their lack of consumerism. None of these lack of rights have been proved by your video at all. This makes you guys look so ridiculous. This just proves that Cuba is what socialists have been saying it is. The paint is peeling off the walls, but because of the revolution, they now have access to doctors. And because of the embargo, they're being forced to ration vital goods, but they're still providing those goods for their people. And they built all these public grocery stores to provide for their people. And they no longer have the slave plantations and the brothels that Western capitalists use and the casinos in Havana. You're proving everything that Parenti and socialists have been saying about the revolution in Cuba for years, and you think you're proving an argument in favor of right-wing talking points.
And it was, my takeaway is that I have never been happier to be an American. Everything that you have seen about Cuba is a lie.
Everything that you have seen about Cuba in this video is a lie. Kind of, not really. Everything the guy said is a lie. They actually showed kind of what Cuba is like. Obviously, they filmed some of the dirtier areas or some of the alleyways and then acted like, this is all of Cuba, this is socialism, when you have a street that's not as clean as a different street. But everything that you see about Cuba in corporate media is generally, regime change propaganda, not necessarily a lie, but it's made to convince you that socialism sucks and it can be solved through regime change from the West. And this is a perfect example of that, as they're pretending to be the outsiders, as they're pretending to be anti-establishment, while supporting the embargo and U.S. regime change efforts and the purposeful attempt to starve the people of Cuba.